Hi, I'm Brittany and welcome to Proverbs Study. Today we are studying Proverbs 5, verse 3 and 4. Proverbs 5, verse 3 and 4 reads in the King James Version, "For the lips of a strange woman drop as an honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword." Again, we're talking about this strange woman. The same strange woman from Proverbs 3, I believe. This same woman is warned about because we came to the conclusion before that this strange woman is directly connected to Satan. This woman, their only purpose is just like in Proverbs 4, is to see you destroyed. The only purpose of the evil, wicked person is to see God's people destroyed. And everyone is God's people because he made all of us. And so we are all the enemy of Satan because Satan cannot stand God's people, God's creation. He wants to see it all destroyed. So this focus here is for warning purposes. The previous verse says, the first two verses say, "My son, attend to my wisdom and bow down thine ear to my understanding, that thou mayest regard discretion, that thy lips may keep knowledge." And so last video we talked about how our lips keep knowledge, how our lips are able to keep knowledge. Once we decide to use them, we're going to be knowledgeable because we did what the verse talks about. We regarded discretion because we attended to God's wisdom and we bowed down our ears in humility to his understanding so that we could regard discretion so that our lips could keep knowledge. So it was a process. And the comparison, this is one of those contrast and comparison parts. So the comparison between the lips of verse 2 and the lips in verse 3 is that they're being used, right? These lips referring to what is said out of the mouth. What is said out of the mouth in verse 2 refers to observing a process that leads you to speak knowledgeably because you followed a process that began with wisdom. In verse 3, the contrast here is the lips of this strange woman, drop as an honeycomb, meaning they're going to look and appear very sweet. And her mouth is smoother than oil. It's gonna come very easily to our ears. It's gonna appear sweet and it's gonna be so smooth, but her end is bitter. Meaning this strange woman, even though it may seem or appear sweet initially and smooth or slick or easy to take in or even easy to understand, the end of those words is bitter. Her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. So not only is it bitter, or it's like there's a bite to it when we take it in and chew on it. What she said, there's a bite to it. Bitterness makes you cringe a little bit, and it makes you not like it, and you want to spit it back out. Sharp as a two-edged sword, meaning the intention behind these bitter words is to pierce through something. And I would say that that something has a lot to do with our heart. In chapter 4, it heavily talked about how our heart, we were supposed to keep his words and his sayings in the middle of our heart. And if his words and his sayings are in the middle of our heart, then everything that we decide to do out of our heart is affected by his words and his sayings, which is wisdom. Because we've been attending to his words. And that's in verse 20 and 21. So now in chapter 5, again, it's saying, attend to God's wisdom and God's understanding. So first it was God's words and his sayings. Now it's God's wisdom and his understanding. So we're not leaning on our own understanding. Even when it comes to these good sounding, smooth sounding, nice memes, but they're bitter, and the end is intended to pierce. That means it's trying to pierce through something. It could be our heart. It could be the understanding that God has given us. It could be to divide us from God. There's so many implications behind why her sweet sounding, seemingly smooth words are actually bitter and as sharp as a two-edged sword. Two-edged sword is meant to cut through and divide something. So the enemy he plays no games. He tries to divide us away from each other and from the Lord. And he does that with smooth words that sound really nice. But at the end, it's bitter. So we need to be careful of how we use our words, especially as leaders, especially as people of God, especially as leaders amongst God's people, leaders in our workplace, leaders in our home. We need to be careful that we're not taking in the words from the lips of a strange woman, which is just a representative of what is intended to divide. Because the point of division is to be conquered. So we don't want any division. We want God's words, God's sayings, God's wisdom, God's understanding. Let that be and sink into our hearts. I hope that was clear. I'd love to hear what you think about that in the comments.